Hi, I'm Dave. It's November 2017 and I thought I would put this video together to show you the ups and downs, ins and outs, pluses and minuses of building a particular guitar kit. I've got a bit of spare time and I thought this would be an interesting project. I own a few guitars. Unfortunately, I'm not a great guitar player, far from it, and I'm certainly no luthier, but I do have a little bit of DIY experience, and if you fancy building your own kit guitar, then I would encourage you to do so. But be prepared for one or two unexpected hiccups along the way. I don't suppose it matters what kit you may decide to buy, but there are one or two difficulties likely to arise, nothing insurmountable. So how did I go about choosing a particular guitar kit to engage myself in? Well, as you do, you turn to the internet these days, and there are many different kits available, and there are certainly plenty of videos on YouTube showing customers who have bought kit guitars and their experiences of treating the body and finishing it and generally enjoying the process, and that's certainly my case. I chose to go with a product called Coban Guitars from a UK supplier, UK Musical Supplies. I chose it on the back of decent reviews and a phone call to the retailer to ask about one or two questions that I suppose inevitably occur before you incur expense on something like this. This guitar kit, and I'll show you the instrument in a moment, it's complete. It costs £139 sterling. Not the most expensive kit you could buy, and certainly not the cheapest. But I thought it looked like a good middle of the road product to have a go at. And if you fancy building your own guitar, I can tell you there are frustrations, but it's very rewarding. And this video will tell you the ups and downs, as I say, of my experiences with it. So, having phoned the retailer and got some assurance, I gathered that it is a Chinese import. The response from the retailer was very quick, very friendly, so that's certainly in their favour, and I was assured that if I had any problems along the way that were making me scratch my head, that they would be there to help, and so that's good. It's a good experience. So this is the instrument here. It's a product by Coban Guitars, C-O-B-A-N. It's a Chinese import, and it's in the style of a PRS guitar. PRS headstock shape, and a similar kind of PRS control panel here too. So I waited a couple of days for delivery for this, and it duly arrived in the box, well packaged. And I had a look at the body first of all. It was nicely prepared, smooth, sanded down smooth. The routing for the cavities was well done, I would say, and the neck was equally good. It's a one-piece mahogany neck, although at the heel it becomes a two-piece affair. As you can see, the colour change here, and that's to take the screws for the bolt-on neck that this model is. So the code number for this product is PRS Kit 1 from UK Musical Supplies, and the code number is G for Golf, D for Delta 815. PRS Kit 1 GD 815. It's advertised on Amazon. I bought directly from UK Musical Supplies and got it a little bit cheaper than I would have done if I'd gone to Amazon. So let me tell you about the neck first of all. As I said earlier, it's a one-piece mahogany affair, except at the heel it's two-piece. It's I would describe it as a D profile, similar to a Gibson Les Paul. It's not as slender a neck as, say, a Squire Strat or maybe some of the current Fender Strats. It's a D shape, I would say, and it's really nice and solid. It has a decent rosewood fretboard on it, which you can see there. It's no thin veneer fretboard, it's quite a substantial piece of rosewood on there. And the neck carries 22 medium frets. There are mother of pearl style inlays along the neck to tell you what fret you're on, and also along the top edge of the rosewood there are fret markers in white there as well. And one of the other things I need to talk about is the fretwork on the neck as it came from the factory. There's no doubt that putting a fret rocker metal tool across the frets to determine whether any are proud or sunk proved that there were several frets a little bit too high for comfort. Now, as I said at the start, I am no luthier, and I certainly don't have the tools to correct those high frets to make the instrument playable. And so reluctantly, I suppose, I went to a local guitar shop and employed the services of a very good luthier. His name is Bob Mould in Guitar Edinburgh, and what a fine job Bob made of levelling the frets for me. I knew that I didn't have the skills to do that. He does. He polished them up, and the frets are now making the instrument very playable indeed. So my thanks to Bob Mould for that excellent work. He's a very good chap and very friendly. We'll talk to you about guitars all day long, I guess. So thank you very much, Bob. The action is really quite low on this guitar now, and it plays nicely, as you'll hear at the end. The holes for the machine heads were very nicely drilled, and the 6 pre-drilled holes for the small screws that fasten the back of each machine head to the body were spot on in terms of factory drilling. The machine heads themselves are, I would say, typical inexpensive machine heads. Time will tell, I think, as to how durable they are and how accurate and how well they help to hold the guitar in tune. But for the moment I've fitted them and they went into the headstock perfectly. The truss rod cover plate here, I did have to drill the 3 holes that hold the truss rod cover in place. They were not pre-drilled at the factory, but it was a simple job and the plate attached without difficulty. The nut itself is, I don't think it's bone, but it feels colder to the touch than plastic, so it may be some kind of amalgam. It's well set, square in the neck, there are no gaps or anything, and so that looks to be quite well done, I would say. So how did I treat this neck and get it to the finish that you see here? Before I describe that, let me say that the neck fitment into the body is tight. It's a good hand in glove arrangement, I would say. There are no gaps or play evident in the touching surfaces. This plate, which secures the body to the neck, is a nice quality. It's a heavy plate, it's nicely chromed, there are no rough edges around its perimeter. The black liner washer, if you like, that the plate sits into to protect the wood from the metal plate is very smooth. There are no rough edges on that either, and the plate sits into it perfectly. The 4 holes drilled in the body and through into the neck to accept these high quality screws are perfectly drilled. So, on to finishing the neck. Well, as I say, it came out the box in a nice condition, very smooth, well worthy of further attention, with 320 grit paper, then on to 400 and finally 600 grade. That rendered it very smooth indeed, and I used a slightly damp cloth to raise any remaining grain, and finished off with 600 grit paper. It was ready for its first 2 dressings. Now, at this stage the mahogany neck looked really quite pale, but as soon as I applied the first dressing of boiled linseed oil, wow, did that bring out the colour and the grain? Yes, it did, and it looked very attractive indeed, enriching the whole appearance of the neck. After 15 or 20 minutes there was still some excess linseed oil on the surface, and so that was rubbed off and left to dry for 24 hours. After 24 hours I repeated the process. The linseed oil was applied with a lint-free linen pad, and again after 15 or 20 minutes any excess that had not sunk into the wood, and most of it did, it was wiped clean with a paper towel. So neck was beginning to look quite promising. And on to the finish. Well, I would have liked to have used an oil finish to make it feel as if you're in touch with the neck when you're playing the instrument, but having had a look at the veneer on the body of the guitar, and I'll come on to this in more detail in a moment, I wondered about the durability of treating the veneer here to a simple oil oblique wax based finish. The veneer is very thin on the body, as it is with all veneer topped bodies. This is no 4 or 5 millimeter maple cap that you might find on a Gibson Les Paul. It's probably a veneer of 1 millimeter at best. So I decided, and many people will not like the idea of a polyurethane finish, but in the interest of durability across the whole instrument, that was my rationale for using that treatment. But I didn't use 100% polyurethane varnish. That would have been very thick and heavy. So on top of the linseed oil, I gave this neck 6 coats of a very dilute polyurethane white spirit, known also as mineral spirit in the States. I gather it's the same stuff. So the ratio was 80% white spirit, 20% gloss polyurethane varnish. A very thin fluid indeed, and applied it again with a lint-free linen pad. That was left to dry for 24 hours, at which point I rubbed down with 600 grit paper and applied the next coat. Left for 24 hours and applied altogether 6 coats of 80 white spirit oblique 20 polyurethane varnish, at the end of which it was very smooth, and despite the fact that the amount of varnish was slight, I was beginning to get a nice gloss finish on the top. I knew also that I would have to give it a couple of heavier coats as a durable finish, and that's what happened. Although first of all I decided that I would want to have a couple of little headstock logos on the instrument, and so I designed something simple on Microsoft Word and took the design to a local sign making shop. They produced these 2 logos. I don't know if you can see that. That's my surname there, and the word custom to go onto the truss rod plate cover. It's a flat gold self-adhesive vinyl, and I knew that the surname logo here would have to be covered in a couple of coats of the final varnishing. So the final varnishing that the neck received was 2 coats of a much higher concentration of polyurethane to white spirit. In fact, it was 80% polyurethane gloss varnish to just 20% white spirit. Again, it was applied after rubbing down with a lint-free linen pad, and 2 top coats went on, sealed the unit, the headstock logo here, and the neck was finished, and it looked really quite nice. Feels good, doesn't feel too thick and heavy. So I was really pleased with the result of the finish that I had given it. So onto the body now. Well, the body is a 3-piece mahogany body, which has come up very nicely with the linseed oil and white spirit. It had exactly the same number of coats and treatment as I described for the neck, and I hope you'll agree it's brought it out to be really quite a nice finish. This is spalted maple veneer top on the guitar body, and many of you will know what spalted wood is. For the uninitiated at the moment, then spalted wood is wood that's been attacked by some form of fungus. Now, I'm no botanist, so I can't go into the detail of that, but it does result in an attack on the surface of the wood, such that there are scars and abrasions left as a result of that attack. I did not spend a lot of time sealing those abrasions and minor scars and little imperfections. Wood is wood, and I rather like it in its natural state. I don't really think there's a need for, certainly not for a homemade guitar maybe, to have a high gloss immaculate nitrocellulose finish. I rather like the appearance of natural wood, and so I didn't seal this wood at all, and I certainly, as I say, didn't fill in the imperfections that the spalting process had created. I mean, this is a multicoloured surface, and you would have needed perhaps half a dozen different colours of wood filler, and when you coated that with the final varnish, it could have looked like something that had the measles, so I decided against going down that route. And although it's not ultra smooth, it's still a highly polished, highly smooth finish, and very, very comfortable in the hand, really. So that was the rationale for that, and of course, given that it's such a thin veneer, it does have all those coats of polyurethane on it, and should be durable for many years, I would say, without having to rub down, and perhaps, and you need to be careful about rubbing down spalted wood of this thinness, you could actually rub right through the surface of it into the mahogany body. So another reason, I think, for being gentle with how you prepare a spalted veneer top. It's a 2-piece veneer. It's joined in the middle, but the join is very nicely done, and I think it looks great. Very interesting, slightly unusual. The body has this detailing round the perimeter, which is well attached. There are no loose points on it at all. That's quite impressive. The guitar strap studs at the top here and at the back, if you can see that, fitted on very well. There's a little plastic washer to protect the wood from the metal stud, and the screws were nicely long, and these studs are very secure indeed. The pickups are unbranded Chinese type. It was disappointing, I think, to find that there was no indication in the rather poor instruction sheets that come with the guitar as to who made them, and certainly not whether one belonged in the neck cavity and the other in the bridge cavity. I scratched my head a little bit over deciding which was which, and the only assumption I could make was that because this pickup here had a longer wire coming out the back of it than this one, that this must be the neck pickup because the wire has further to travel through the cavities in the body to the control panel. And that was my only rationale for saying this must be the neck pickup and the shorter wired one the bridge pickup. I later noticed a couple of stamps in the metal at the back of the pickups. This one has FC50 and this one is stamped FC52, and I gather now that the FC50, the 50 designation, may well refer to the overall pole spacing of the magnets here, and because the guitar is slightly wider at the bridge end, that this is 52 millimeters overall spacing of the magnets. So my assumption with the wire is probably correct, but the instruction manual I think could have made that clearer. However, not an insurmountable problem. I made the right decision in the end. The 4 screws for the bridge pickup that are pre-drilled at the factory were pre-drilled perfectly. This pickup went into its cavity absolutely flawlessly. The neck pickup, these 2 screws here, perfectly drilled, but these 2 here were at least 2 millimeters out. And so obviously I was going to have to drill 2 new holes to set the plate in accurately, and that's what I did. First of all though, I had to fill in the factory drilled holes, and I did that with some short pieces of glued in toothpick, wooden toothpick. They were the perfect diameter to fill the holes in and gave a little bit of support in that area before I drilled the 2 new holes there. So that was done, the 2 screws went in fine, and the plate fortunately covers over the repairs that were done, so there's no evidence that that has actually taken place, so good result there. I mentioned earlier that the wire coming from the back of this is longer to reach the control cavity than this one, and that's fine, except the wire wasn't long enough to reach the soldering points in the control cavity from this pickup, and so I had to find a piece of suitable screen cable, perhaps about 5 or 6 inches short it was, and I joined that on, soldering the joints and using some black heat shrink material to insulate the joint, and then as a belt and braces job put some black electrical tape around the whole thing, and you will see from one of the still shots that that joint is evident. Shouldn't have had to do that, it's a quality control issue, but again it's not an insurmountable problem, and it has proved to be an effective repair, if you like. Let me turn now to the tremolo system. The tremolo system is quite a substantial component. It's a Wilkinson style in that there are 2 pivot points here for the plate to move against. Now I made a mistake when trying to fit the posts into the factory drilled sockets of trying to push them in forcibly by hand. These are splined posts going into pre-drilled sockets, and there was just no way that I could force them in by hand. I did not fancy using some form of wooden mallet to drive them home. Didn't have the courage to do that. I suspect that's what you will have to do though if you go for this kit. And as I say, I made the mistake of giving up trying to push them in by hand, and I took a round file to the sockets and reamed them out very slightly. Mistake, because I was then able, with very substantial pressure nevertheless, to push the posts home into the sockets, but what happened later was when I strung up the guitar and the strains and tensions took effect and the plate began to move with the tremolo action, it actually lifted the posts out of the sockets. And so my solution there was to glue the posts into the sockets. That's my mistake. Forewarned is forearmed, as they say. My mistake, nothing to do with the kit. I have in fact disabled the tremolo system. I don't use the tremolo system at all if I'm playing. But I've shown the tremolo arm here just for illustration purposes. It's a nice solid steel heavily chromed arm and it fits well. The only modification I've made to the parts that came with the kit are to put some roller saddles into the plate here, purely in the interests of tuning stability. There is a still shot in this video showing the type of saddle you can expect in this kit, which is usual Chinese affair, perfectly adequate I suppose, and I just decided that I would put the roller saddles in to try and make sure that it stayed in tune as far as possible. As I say, the plate is very thick, heavily chromed, nice quality, yes indeed it is, and the block underneath all this is really quite a weighty affair. It's not steel, it is alloy, but it's not the usual thin type of block that you might get on a cheaper kit. It's a full-size block, alloy as I say, but again that does bode well for sustain. There are 3 claw springs provided to keep the block in the correct position, and they are decent quality too, I have to say. Concerning intonating the guitar, it proved to be difficult. Difficult because there was insufficient travel backwards of all 6 saddles to be able to intonate it properly at the 12th fret. It's almost as if the machining of the positioning of the bridge plate is too far forward. Had it been positioned just a few millimeters to the rear of the guitar, I don't think the difficulties I encountered in intonating the instrument would have arisen. Let me explain a little bit further. With the springs at the back of each saddle, in what you would describe as a normal staggered position, the guitar strings, all 6 of them, were very sharp. So when you're intonating a guitar at the 12th fret, you back off the saddles, compressing the springs as you go. Try it again, bit by bit, and in particular the bottom E string was still nowhere near being accurate at the 12th fret, but the spring was fully compressed, and yet the saddle still needed to go further back. And to a large extent that is the same that applies to the other 5 strings, although not quite so much. I ended up having to cut portions of each of the 6 strings off completely to allow a little bit further travel backwards of each saddle before the guitar could be intonated properly. Now there is a still shot within this video that shows even now the heavy compression of what was left of the springs before I was able to intonate it properly. So it's not an insurmountable problem, but in this particular guitar, on this particular kit, my kit, it certainly needed a little bit of adjustment, shall we say. So there we have it. It has intonated properly, and with the roller saddles on, it's actually holding its tune very well. Turning now to the control buttons, volume and tone. These are nice quality. They fit onto the posts very well. They are smooth in operation, despite the fact that these are just small mini pots, which you'll see again from one of the still shots. Turning to the control pots, one further anomaly that I found when I was starting to play it was that the volume and tone knobs were wired back to front. In other words, on full clockwise there was no volume and the tone was very mellow on the bass side. Turning it through 360 degrees, turned the volume up and brought the treble up. So they were in reverse, if you like, and I had to figure out what soldering had to be undone and redone to make the controls work in conventional fashion. In other words, as you turn clockwise, the volume goes up and the treble comes up. Quite why it was like that, I don't know. Maybe, I can't get my head around this, but maybe it was a wiring harness provided for a left-handed guitar. These thoughts occur to me, but there was a solution there which I managed to effect successfully. The three-way switch is very solid in operation, inspires confidence actually, and works well. The only thing that was missing regarding this three-way switch was this knurled screw washer to hold the three-way switch onto the body. That was missing, and I had to source that locally. And while I was at it, I procured this Gibson Les Paul style rhythm treble selection decal in black, just as a finishing touch really. It's not something that comes with the kit, I understand. Maybe it should. Quite a nice touch. The socket for the jack to go in is nice quality, not Switchcraft quality, but certainly very acceptable at this price point. The chromium plate is nicely done and the two fixing screw holes were perfectly drilled, so no complaints there at all. Turning now to the cavities in the body of the guitar, and in particular obviously the routing. The routing is of good quality, I would say. It's smooth inside, the cavities are smooth inside, there's not a lot of rough edges there at all. There is no EMI screening paint applied to the cavities, perhaps not surprising at this price point. But my philosophy is, if you can over-engineer something without too many cost implications, then go for it. And that's why you'll see from the still shots that I have thoroughly copper foil lined all of the cavities in the guitar, including the rear of this tremolo plate and the rear of the control cavity plate. These copper foils have been properly earthed, and I have to say that, probably mostly due to the fact that these are humbucker pickups, this guitar is silent as far as EMI interference is concerned. As I say, probably mostly because they are humbucker pickups, but maybe I like to think because I've done a thorough job on the screening as well. It's all added up to what is a hum-free guitar. So that's about it really. Maybe I should just go back to the most curious thing that I found with assembling this guitar, and that concerns these four screws here that hold the neck into the cavity, the pocket. All four screws provided in my kit were the same length, and that's fine for these two because they go through the body of the guitar into the thickest part of the neck. No problem there at all. These two screws here go through the back of the guitar as intended, but they go into a thinner part of the neck, and that's where the problem arose, because the screws were so long that they came quite far into the cavity that houses the neck pickup. How far? Maybe 1.5 centimetres, which would, of course, completely preclude the proper seating of the neck pickup. Solution: back off the screws, put them in a vise, saw off the offending extra length, re-screw, which doesn't affect the stability of the neck, and allow the neck pickup to go in properly. Quality control issue again? Yep, I did scratch my head at that point, thinking how on earth have the factory given me 4 screws of the same length when surely somebody must have known that 2 shorter screws would be required. The solution was found, and I guess you've just got to cope with that sort of thing if it arises in the kit that you might buy. So that's really all I need to say, I think, about the kit itself. It's a nice kit, yes, there are 1 or 2 anomalies and frustrations along the way, but nothing that ever made me think, you know, I wish I'd never got involved in this. Not at all. I've enjoyed building this kit. It is quality, and I think it's turned out pretty well. I hope you'll agree. The one thing I would say is, if this has encouraged you to think about buying your own kit, is if you do, then make sure that you're patient with building it, particularly with regard to drying times of whatever finish you might apply to the body. It's all too easy, I think, to rush that process when materials have not dried or cured properly in the interest of being overly keen to play the damn thing. If you rush the finishing process, it's not likely to look as good as it should. So, you know, 24-hour curing time, drying time is probably the minimum you should give whatever coatings you're giving the instrument. The other thing I would say is that, you know, be proud of building a guitar. If you've done it well, hang it on your wall or put it on your guitar stand, play it of course, and think to yourself, I built that, I'm proud of that. And maybe if you've done a reasonable job of it, people will congratulate you as well. It's probably a good idea to not buy the entry-level kits. There does appear to be some quality control issues far beyond what this instrument has presented me with. If you can go for something like this one, and there is a still shot elsewhere in this video which shows the total cost of the unit, including the sundries like white spirit and varnish and what have you. The finished weight of the guitar, if you're interested, is 7 3/4 pounds. That's about just over 3.5 kilograms, which means that it's not in the weight league of a Gibson Les Paul, but it does mean that it's no lightweight and substantial enough to inspire a feeling of quality. So there we have it. I did say earlier on that I'm not a great guitarist, and neither I am. I just jam around in the house, mostly bluesy stuff. But my young grandson James, who is learning the guitar, has already far exceeded my meagre capabilities on the instrument, and I'm going to get James to do some tones for you. We'll do some clean tones. We'll demonstrate each pickup. We'll be playing through a PV Bandit 112. The controls will generally be set at 12 o'clock, and we'll do some overdrive tones through a Boss ME50 multi-pedal. We're using Roland guitar cables, and the microphone I've used for this presentation is a trusty old Shure SM58, and we'll also use that for recording the sounds. So it just remains for me to say this has been my first presentation to YouTube. I hope I've done it to the best of my ability, and it's certainly my first guitar build, I might well be tempted to do another one in the future. Of course, the danger of that is that you end up getting engrossed in the whole thing and ending up with a house full of guitars that you're not sure what to do with. Well, that's the way it goes. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. I hope I've been informative. I hope I've given a fair appraisal of what is a decent guitar kit from this company, Coban Guitars. And rock on! If you want to make a comment about the quality of the sound that the guitar produces, and I must say I haven't found there to be a tremendous difference between the tonal variation of the pickups in their various selector switches, but if you want to make a comment, maybe a constructive suggestion would be for you not to make those comments based on the rather poor speakers that are in smartphones, laptops, tablets, etc. We all know that they are not by any means full range loudspeakers, and I think maybe a good idea would be to plug some headphones into the device that you're watching and listening on, or into a hi-fi if you have that facility, or even into your guitar amplifier to get a better idea of the full range of sounds. Just a suggestion. Please don't be afraid to comment. If you don't like the sound, by all means say so. So, let me know with your comments, if you care to comment, about how you think this project has gone. What might I have done better, differently? What would you have done? I'm fairly thick-skinned. If you want to criticise my efforts, that's absolutely fine. If you want to praise them, that's even nicer. And I did say earlier on that I am no guitar player, but you know, what the hell, I've built this thing, and I think I might just play out with the credits a little bit of B-flat blues pentatonic for you. Hope you like it.